Hi, everyone. Here, Jimmy Nguyen, your host of the Psychedelic Passage podcast. I'm very excited to present part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Glauber Assis. You can for sure go back and check out part 1. I think you'll really enjoy our conversation there. But to get everybody refreshed and updated, a little bit about Dr. Glauber. He is an indigenous rights activist, has a PhD in sociology. He's an author, a co-founder, a leader of a legal Santo Daime ayahuasca church in Brazil, co-founder of Jornadas de Cura, a plant medicine center in Brazil, and also a founder of the Psychedelic Parenthood community. Dr. Glauber has 15 years of experience with sacred plant medicines, of which he's built his practice in dialogue with local Brazilian ayahuasca community and with the blessing of indigenous elders and activists in Brazil. If anybody knows anything about me, I really try to hold a bridge between the traditional and ceremonial aspects of this work and then also the cutting edge part of mental health and possibly clinical work with psychedelics. I think Dr. Glauber is another one of those bridges, and I am so excited to be a part of the conversation with him, to hear his perspective on the future of psychedelics and how they can help support the betterment of humanity. Without further ado, I present to you part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Glauber Assis. I want to add something because you're making a really good point, because I talk about this all the time and a lot of folks in the psychedelic culture talk about this, but there can be this element of what they call like psychedelic exceptionalism or spiritual superiority or moral superiority because folks explore psychedelics. And I really try to dispel that, because just because you do a certain thing or take psychedelics, it actually does not make you a better person. You make you a better person. And oftentimes the psychedelic experience can like mirror and reflect you. And so a lot of times, much like ChatGPT, folks find themselves in an echo chamber of the self, where they may feel like they're hearing something or getting a message and whatever, but it's just their own stories and illusions and beliefs that are just like reverberating in this like echo chamber. And so I've seen folks do a lot of drugs and psychedelics and all of those things, and they have just as much work in store and ahead of them than anybody else. And so for many people, it can feel like, oh, well, they're more ahead than me, or I want this person to show me how they got there. And then we unconsciously give our power, away to that. And so I really try to break down as much of that like moral superiority, or what they call that like, psychedelic exceptionalism. And I think I'm arriving at an answer to my question for you. What I hear you say, what comes up for me when people talk about ayahuasca told me or grandma told me, there is this interesting relationship that means that something external came in and told you something, whether it's the medicine or whatnot. And that still falls on this like, well, is it coming from the external or the external?
Yes, and I have also a thought about this thing about ayahuasca told me. Yes, ayahuasca told you, but you needed to translate it. So how did you translate what ayahuasca told you? Because if a Japanese friend just called me and starts talking in Japanese, I might say, oh, my Japanese friend told me that, yes, but what is it, So that's why I believe, because if you are, for example, a very radical person that wants to bomb the whole world and everything, ayahuasca is going to use their own language, and you're going to translate it as more violence, being more aggressive. So that's why culture is very important. And by culture, I also mean therapists and psychedelic assisted therapy protocols, because the thing that we bring with us are the tools that we have to translate this message. Because it's important to acknowledge, of course, according to many different ancestral traditions, plant medicine, psychedelics, they have a spirit, they have their own agency. they have their own power also to bring message and to lead us. But if you're not well equipped in a way that we can translate it and make it something meaningful in our own lives, we might do even worse things than we
Mm,
did before. So that's why I like to make a parallel between psychedelic assisted therapy and indigenous communities, in the
mm,
sense that people in the United States, they're always also talking about a paradigm shift in mental health.
yeah.
And a lot of amazing friends that we have in common, they're
Mhm,
bringing this like paradigm shift in mental health and psychiatry is only going to happen if we bring this human element,
mm,
like the therapist in the room. Otherwise, we're just going to replicate these failed models of treating mental health, and but with better drugs or better compounds and molecules. But that's not the core of the healing we are seeking for. So the same thing with indigenous communities. The guarantee that we have that an ayahuasca experience, a peyote experience, is a healing one is provided not by the molecules, but by the community, the
mm.
culture. Then you have, a right direction to follow.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying because I think many folks regard mental health, psychedelic work, and indigenous and ceremonial or traditional psychedelic work on two opposite ends of the spectrum, but they are actually there's a lot more commonality. And I tell people all the time, it has to work for our society. So how does this work here in America? And of course, you're in Brazil. You spoke to that when you were talking about there was the conservative and then there was also this like spiritual aspect and more like natural aspect to, Brazil. And so it then does have a conversation about the intersection on how we regard mental health, how we regard emotional well-being, physical well-being, spiritual well-being, how we regard families, because one of the things you talked about, the consumer class, like 60 years ago was the working class, and
Yeah.
here in America, it was a social agreement that if you do these certain things, then you will be guaranteed certain freedoms, freedom of, financial stability, freedom of, let's say, like owning a home, freedom of making choices, that are best for you and your family. And what we've, I think, seen is that there are many people who have followed that and then they still have these existential questions about what am I doing again and why does this matter and like what's important. And so assuming that those social contracts are need revision, let's say, because if these questions still arise, it says if you do these things, then you'll find your fulfillment, essentially. And then we do these things and we're like, I don't think I really feel fulfilled, you know? And so that means that there needs to be a new way in which we engage with ourselves and our society and culture, which we spoke to, of which psychedelics can be an interesting pathway, towards that. And I'm curious for you because I know indigenous representation is core to your work. And you were telling me about some of your work and participation in the World Ayahuasca Forum and, some of these things. I'll lay it on a backdrop because people in America understand mental health and understand therapists, at least to a degree. They're familiar with it. They understand clinical trials. They understand scientific study. They understand those things. There's a part of me that feels like the clinical mental health world with psychedelics like doesn't need as much help. Maybe that's a reductive thing that I'm saying there. And I also think that, indigenous work and legacy and traditions are generally like underrepresented or at a minimum misunderstood. So I'm curious to you, like, what is the importance of indigenous representation? Like if I was a listener to this episode and I was like, why do I want to feel better? Like I've been suffering for 40 years and nothing's worked. I want to feel better. Why does indigenous anything matter to me right now? I'm curious what comes up in your heart as I pose that theoretical question.
Thank you very much. This is also, yeah, a big topic. And since you mentioned the social contract, there is an important discussion about this kind of anthropological idea of the bifurcation of nature, because this is like the foundation of the Western civilization is the separation between nature on the one side and human beings and humankind on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But for the big questions that we have right now, this doesn't work anymore. So if we're talking about climate change, it's not possible to separate things into different expertise, different little boxes, because this has to do with oil, this has to do with economy, this
It's
has
all
to do
related. It's all
all
related.
related. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why dialogues are more important than ever. And
Oh.
so, in many indigenous peoples that I know and indigenous representatives, they're open to have good dialogues. But then there is a very subtle yet very important difference between representation and the multiplicity of roles, or to put in other words, the plural and the multiple, which means one thing is when you have like a conference and you bring indigenous voices to have a panel, for example. This is like the plural. You are building a plural environment with different voices, but we still have, that single narrative about how things should go, and you have different voices there. The other thing is the multiple. We don't accommodate the plurality of voices in the single narrative or the single vision about how people could alleviate their suffering. You stay with this thing like different worlds altogether. There's this friction between worlds, and this is where real healing lives, in my opinion, because of course people, they need to alleviate their suffering. They deserve that. They're struggling so hard. The world now is so uncertain, full of wars, full of complexity, suffering. But a lot of this healing that we are serving people and offering to people, they are very short term, because we are still going to face climate change. We are still going to face the collapse of many different biocultures, animals. We are still going to face all the challenges regarding migration and everything. So what
Mm,
indigenous peoples they bring is not only a healthy way to consume psychedelics, it's also different perspectives about how to live our lives, how to have joy in the middle of the challenge. When the pandemic emerged, and then people were very concerned about some of the indigenous territories here. And they asked Ailton Krenak, one of the indigenous elders from Minas Gerais here, "Oh, Ailton Krenak, poor guys you are, like, how can we do to support you in the middle of the pandemics?" And he answered, "I'm not concerned about us, because we are use it to survive the extinction of our world. We are concerned about you,
mm,
because you, non-indigenous peoples, you are not well equipped to deal with very, very challenging moments." So what indigenous peoples they bring, like besides beyond plant medicine wisdom, the protection of biocultures, they also bring different narratives. It brings different ways of fostering bonds of kinship to each other, to nature, to plant
mm,
medicine. But
mhm,
also, they bring this amazing worldview about how to have joy in our lives. And this, I
mhm,
believe, is very necessary, because clinical trials and the clinical settings, they can bring a lot of good things. But new, ancient philosophies is something that they can still not do for us.
I think that relates back to something you said. We were talking about that movie Gravity, and if the idea is to return home, then we also need to make sure that there is a home for us to return to. And I think that there's the home in like the heart and in the body, but then also one of the things that I heard recently from this individual that I follow, a mentee.world on Instagram, they were like, the body is how we relate to this world. The body is also how we relate to others. I find that really fascinating because I'll draw an example that I share with folks. It's not our fault in America that people look at psychedelics like, what can it do for me? It's not our fault that we are trying to like get something out of it. But basically what I'm saying is it's not our fault that there is a natural extractivist mentality around psychedelic use. Here's this thing, it can do something for me, so I'm going to consume it and it will do this. And I'm inspired by, we had Zach Leary, Timothy Leary's son, on the podcast not too long ago, and he was talking about set and setting, and he was like, I'll introduce another one. It's actually set, setting, and sustainability. Not only sustainability in your own healing process, but also sustainability to make sure that if you have access to these psychedelics and these compounds and these medicines, that our children also will be able to. And I'm inspired. I've kind of heard that in the background of you, because I'm hearing you talk, and I'm hearing children playing in the background, and I'm also hearing children crying in the background, and I'm like, this is what life is like. Like, we could sit here and like fix the audio and whatever, and I'm like, oh, or we could just let it unfold and ensure that if we're doing anything, that we can create and make sure that this home is still around for our like children and our future generations. And I don't have kids, and not everybody does. And I'm also inspired a little bit, and maybe this is a little bit of a tie-in to the psychedelic parenthood community. I want to shift focus here a little bit and talk about some of your fun and cool projects and exciting projects. Let's talk a little bit about psychedelic parenthood community. Why does that matter? What are you all up to? How can people follow like that work there?
Okay, yes, and I think this is actually linked to what we have been discussing, because I don't know if you know this, Jimmy, but people are used to believe that the Amazon rainforest is untouched, like this pristine environment that is there forever. But actually, that's not true, because the Amazon rainforest is such an amazing, rich, complex environment because people change it, that space. Indigenous peoples, they have been exchanging with the forest for millennia. And that's why it's so beautiful and so full of life, which means that indigenous voices and communities, they also teach us how to not be so, so paralyzed, because we are here also to really change the world, to change our lives. And this is something that really, really, really resonates with me.
Mm,
This capacity that we have, at least, to change our own lives. And so psychedelics did something very beautiful for me that changed me as a human being.
me too.
And when we are in this new age circuits and everything, people are always talking about the inner child. And sometimes this is kind of a superficial conversation, but actually becoming more like a child is something that is really beautiful. So, and
Mm,
psychedelics also helped me to realize that my children, they are not only apprentices of me and my wife and our family, but they're also big teachers, because
mm,
they want to fix things, they want to change things, they want to exchange the energy. So psychedelics have been also teaching me how to be a better parent, how
mm,
to be a better father, how to be a better son, how to
mm,
be a better grandson, and to acknowledge all the efforts, because I know that a big part of all the healing that we need is our intergenerational traumas and these beautiful moments that psychedelics can bring to us, in which we can also see that we bring and we carry the whole human life behind us. This is a beautiful way also to do our best to pass it on to the new generations. So that's why I believe that psychedelic field should be more family friendly.
mm.
Some people, they don't want to have these discussions right now because they believe it's too sensitive and sometimes too new. But this is not true. It's not new at all to
Oh,
begin
it's been
with.
going on for a while. I mean, like, if you look back into American culture and history, There have been teenagers experimenting with psychedelics and LSD and mushrooms pretty far back. Like we go back like many, many, decades with that. So
Yes.
I agree with you.
And if
Yeah.
you look to the indigenous traditions, it goes back to centuries. Like this is the way that they also teach the new generation. So that's why I like to really take seriously the idea of the expansion of consciousness, because it's not only about taking a drug, taking a substance, and having an experience. It's about having a whole new way of life. So, for example, I am one of the co-founders of the psychedelic parenthood community,
Hmm.
and the idea behind it is not about giving psychedelics to children. It's actually about human rights. So, for example, many psychedelic communities, they still suffer from social stigma, from persecution, like very simple things that happens in a daily basis. For example, here in Brazil, this is something am trying to protect my children from. Is that children, they are part of psychedelic communities, they go to school, they didn't take any psychedelics, but then they mention by chance, like, oh yeah, so my family, my mother, she likes sometimes she smokes, and then they suffer a bully at school, and
Hmm.
then for example, the evangelical evangelical families, they don't want their children to be around children that are part of these communities.
Hmm.
So immigrants that are also part of psychedelic communities, they can suffer from this extra layer of persecution. So our the core of the work we do is about human rights, and is this very clear and simple message: no one should be persecuted by being who they are. So I am a
Hmm.
member of a psychedelic community, and my children, they should not suffer because of that. On the contrary, because I am a good father, they are going to school every single day. They like to hear these stories, and I know that in many traditions, including mine, we sit with children and we share stories about our practice. If the guys that are watching us and hearing from us right now, if they like Marvel comics, for example, if they like Batman or Superman, like they should also hear indigenous stories. They're
Hmm.
so much richer. That these superheroes, they have a lot of amazing histories about the guardians of the plants, about the protectors of the forest. So when people ask me, for example, how could we approach psychedelics to children? I would say, like, you should start telling stories behind the plants, behind how amazing and alive this planet is. And then music comes, because music is also very central part of psychedelic communities. And then the psychedelics themselves as substances, they're
Hmm.
just one part of this amazing experience that can also be really helpful. And just adding one more layer to that, that is my personal experience.
Yeah.
My three children, they were born in our psychedelic community. They're very healthy, and psychedelics actually helped me a lot. So just sharing the story behind, there are so many to share, but just one thing that happened with my daughter, actually, because my wife, she was pregnant, and we hired a team of medical doctors that would assist Yada's childbirth. Yada's the name of my daughter. But then when my wife started having contractions and entered into labor, we called this team, but they were busy attending another person that had
Oh
a never
man.
emergency. We live it far from the hospital. So we started praying, and pray is part of our community here. It's also part of our psychedelic practices here. And then my wife was also started being a little upset about timing, because she had this feeling that Yara would be born very soon.
Mm.
So she asked me to just start driving to the hospital. And then before we started, she just prayed a little bit. We just took a very small drop of ayahuasca, not enough to produce any psychedelic effect. But this connection with our culture, my wife started praying for the old midwives, the Black elders that are part of our community and our tradition. And then actually it was super fast. In Brazil, they call it tsunami childbirth because it was super fast. And then I was driving to the hospital. My wife said, "There's no time. Yada is being born right now." I said, "No, Jacqueline, please calm down," because the doctor said on the phone, "It's going to take several hours." But this was not the case. And then I
Mm,
realized that actually she was being born. And then I just had a moment to accelerate a little bit, and Yada actually was born inside my car. So it was my
wow.
wife and I in a car downtown Belo Horizonte, the third biggest city of Brazil. And then she was born, and it was beautiful, and she was healthy, and we were calm enough to go to the hospital. So my point being here, it's not that we took a lot of psychedelics. It's not that psychedelic experience or feeling or effects had an important role there, but being part of this culture, we knew that we were not alone, that there were people praying for us, that we were connected to what we believe, that we had plant medicine there with us. This gave us this confidence that we would make it. And then we made it, you know?
Mhm,
So it's about being part of a community and trust that we are not alone and being respected because we decided to be a psychedelic community, you know?
mm. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really, really powerful story. For those who want to learn more about that, it's psychedelicparenthood.org to hear about the organization. I'll comment really quickly, and I want to ask you about Jornadas de Cura. I don't have any children of my own, but my sister had a child a few years ago, and I what I recognized was that opened up quite a portal in our family. And I think that there was this recognition of like paternal and maternal, lineage and, things like that. And so it's just really inspiring to hear, especially for people who give birth to children alone or without support as well, to hear that you felt this connection to your supporters and to your ancestry and to that piece, because I think that there's a really, near tangible representation of what bringing life into family and into the world represents. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Tell me a little bit more about Jornadas de Cura. One of the things that I was inspired in the little bit that, I've heard in our past conversations, one of the really fascinating things for me is that in your practice, you'll also plant the leaves and the vine and, have this like connection to like where the medicine comes from. I'm curious if you can just give me a little bit of insight into Tornado Secura, what's important there and in your work, and then also just for our audience as well.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, so we co-founded here retreat center that is called Jornadas de Cura, and I like to say that this should not be understood as a retreat, but as a return because we want to offer something different. I respect many different retreat centers, but there's also this other aspect when we are talking about the retreat market and this whole international circuit, because sometimes they're just offering an experience for people to go there, to be like in a spa or to have this fancy experience and to stay disconnected for a few days, and then they take the medicine, and then they have some insights, and then they go back to their daily lives and they have an integration session or something like that. And this can be very positive. But we believe that indigenous cosmologists point to also another possibility, that is to really have a deep connection with the medicine themselves. So what we like to do And actually, this is what we offer to people who decide to share their moments with us, is that before we take the medicine, we are going to cook the medicine together, always led by indigenous elders as well. Because then there's this magic. People can have mystical interpretations, sociological interpretations. But this is a fact. When we have the possibility to create a connection, a relationship with the medicine, we are also aware now about the process. We can also respect that there are people planting the seed, that there are people putting water in these vines, and then there are people harvesting the vines, and then you need to smash the vines, and you need to cook the vines, and it's a tremendous collective work. This is something that can be really magical. So people come here, and then this is also about psychedelic families as well, because we want to welcome all the families. And this is also about responsibility, Jimmy, because
Mm,
psychedelic parenthood or psychedelic families has nothing to do with being naive or not responsible. On the contrary, so we want to have good research, we want to have good data. The thing that we don't want is social stigma, social prejudice, immoral conversations being at the forefront, because we know that this Western civilization is not against drugs at all. It is against different forms of living in planet Earth, because we are giving
mm,
tons, beginning with sugar, we are giving tons of drugs to children. What we are not giving is a chance to have a different perspective about life. So that's what we wanna offer to people, a different perspective about psychedelics, about healing, psychedelic healing. And then before people leave the retreat, everybody's going to plant a vine that
mm.
eventually is also going to become medicine to support other people. And this is something that is very good. And I would like to share a little bit with you, because I know that you are also very committed to the topics of preparation and integration.
Yeah.
So we want to go also, we want to offer different possibilities also to see integration. So we believe that if a person comes to Brazil and plant a seed, we're also supporting them with their integration, because then they know that they have a seed here in Brazil. They have a vine. There's a community that's going to look after this plant for them.
Mm,
And whenever they need support, they are here with us. It was not, that they just came, they came and now we don't need them anymore. Actually, they are now part of this extended family. So
mm.
that's the idea behind this retreat that is held here in Brazil.
Integration is really about watering that seed. That's really what it is. And because I tell people that, like, actually all of the work, I mean, yes, the experience and there's things and a lot of potential magic can happen, but in order to bring it back with us, in order to bring it home with us and into our everyday lives, it's an integration. That's like that watering of the seeds. Now, when I think about like indigenous cultures, like in general, folks are like, well, they don't have preparation and integration. Well, mostly it's because it's built into everyday life. Like preparation, integration is built into everyday life, which I think is that way of living that you're speaking to. And so here in America, it's separate. It's all separate. Like we got to separate things into modules and understandings. And so that's how it works, for our society. And so I'm really, inspired by that. I don't know if I know that you were like, you got to get down here and things like that, but I recently have made a commitment. I'm going to come down and see you guys if you'll have me.
Of course, please come on.
It's something that's been a little bit like a newer, revelation for me. And maybe I'll get to bring a couple of folks and friends and people from our community, or maybe it'll just be me or me and my partner or something. And my first relationship with ayahuasca was in this like very new age spiritual container that I realized was extremely culturally appropriative and also was doing a lot of good, then I also realized was doing a lot of harm. I, stepped away, I think, for many years from ayahuasca and, that medicine, which I feel I have a very important connection to. And so I think for a long time, I've been asking if the medicine will have me back, then maybe help me find a way to come back to the medicine. And I would love that to be with you and your family and the elders down at Jornadas de Cura.
Now you're going to be very welcome. And we are also going to support the community. And you also are going to have an important role here because you mentioned something about separation. And of course, I strongly believe that boundaries are important, but separation is not something good. So that's what we want to change. And of course, we commit mistakes when we have different people from different cultures. We also have challenges, but the amount of beauty that is present when we have this such a diversity of voices, it's amazing. And so that's the thing. We don't want to have like the elders, the indigenous elders and the healers. They are here in this house. The international guests are here in this house. And then the local community are here in this house.
Mm,
And we have different times for the meals. So the workers are going to have a separated meal because the guests they need to have their own meal.
mhm.
It's everybody together, speaking their own language and exchanging. And then we believe that when we have the possibility to face each other and to engage with each other, we also create the container for bringing new solution for old problems.
I love that. The website is Jornadas de Cura. I'm trying to learn how to pronounce it a little bit better in Portuguese. JORNADASDEKURA. We'll put that link in our episode, description as well. And we are arriving at the end of our podcast episode. So I just want to thank you, Glauber, for your heart and your wisdom. And what I really feel from your energy is there's just always this invitation. There's just always this invitation, not just physical, but like an invitation to speak and to dialogue and to think and to wonder and to be curious. And I just like feel that coming through, your words. And so as we wrap up, do you have any message or thoughts or anything on your heart that you want to share with our audience as we wrap up?
I do. Thank you. I'm a little sad that we are already wrapping it up because
We'll do it again. We'll have you
so
back on
good.
again. Yeah, we'll have you back on again. Yeah.
It's so good to talk to you and to hear from you as well, Jimmy. As our friend Michelle McAllister always says, you are an amazing soul and a beautiful person. So thank you very much. And also acknowledging you as an immigrant in the United States who is making a difference. This is so important. But I want to take seriously what you said about an invitation because I strongly believe, and this is something that psychedelics did for me. I strongly believe now that life is an invitation.
Mm.
There is this amazing indigenous elder from Brazil that says that life is a cosmic dance. And I believe it is a cosmic dance that is always inviting us to dance. And the only way to dance this amazing dance of life is with our own feet, our own body, our own mind, and our own soul. So I know that there are lots of tensions, lots of challenges right now, but I strongly believe that there's always another way. That's always a different narrative there. So please don't be attached to just follow one thing or one person or just giving up your dreams because now this is the protocol or now this is the guys that are controlling the money or whatever. No, like psychedelics go far beyond that. And as indigenous voices from the Amazon has been teaching me, we need to trust the mystery. So that's what I would like to share with the audience because there's always something new to learn. That's always a different way to look at things. So I would say that, yeah, if you are interested in learning more, you can always rely on indigenous traditions, understanding that the future is definitely ancestral and you are all part of this amazing dance.
Thank you so much, Glauber, for being here with us. Thank you for all of that. And thank you to the audience. I hope that you all got something amazing and large or small, that I hope that there's something here in our conversation that's hopefully can inspire or support or add value to your own journey, whether related to psychedelics or not, whether related to healing or not. And that wraps up this episode of the Psychedelic Passage podcast. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you all next time.